If the Shroud of Turin is truly the burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth, then something unusual follows. It would mean that God did not leave humanity with stories alone. He left behind an image, not a painting, not an icon, not an artist's interpretation shaped by belief or tradition, but something closer to a photograph, a silent physical trace of real human body, wounded, executed, and then changed. In this episode, I'm not trying to prove the shroud is authentic. I'm not here to debate carbon dating, curves, contamination models, or microscopy. Instead, I want to ask a different kind of question, one engineers tend to ask instinctively. If this object is real, what does it imply? What kind of God would leave behind evidence like this? And what would that say about God's relationship with humanity? Most religions are built primarily on texts, sacred stories, oral traditions, written testimony passed down and interpreted. Christianity certainly has those. The Bible is essentially a library, a history, a poetry, of prophecy, and eyewitness claims. But Christianity also makes a very specific testable claim that God entered history as a human being, not symbolically, not metaphorically, physically. And if that claim were true, it would be odd if God left behind only words. Words can be copied, translated, edited, argued over endlessly. But a physical trace, an imprint, belongs to a different category of knowing. It doesn't persuade through language. It doesn't argue. It simply exists. If the, if the shroud is authentic, then God did not leave behind only testimony, but residue, and with the gospel accounts, sometimes with uncomfortable precision. But here's where things get technically strange. The image is not made of pigment, not paint, not dye. It appears to be a superficial discoloration of the outermost linen fibers, measured in microns, without penetration into the threads, almost as if some form of energy interacted with the cloth from the outside, from the inside outward. Some researchers, carefully and with caveats, have described it as consistent with an image formed by a brief, intense interaction involving light or radiation-like effects. That's not proof, but it is an anomaly. And that's where the analogy comes in. If this image is real, then it isn't a portrait of Jesus. It may be a record of an event, not a resurrection understood as simple resuscitation, but a transformation, a moment where death didn't reverse, but changed state. Consider this: if God wanted belief without evidence, the resurrection could have left no physical trace at all. No empty tomb, no witnesses, no burial cloth. Instead, Christianity begins with claims that are oddly concrete. A tomb that could be inspected, witnesses who claimed physical interaction, touching, eating, conversation, and possibly a burial cloth carrying the physical consequences of something extraordinary. This does not resemble a God hiding behind pure mystery. It resembles a God willing to be examined, not coerced belief, but invited belief. A God who seems to say, you don't have to accept this blindly. Look, touch, think. At a minimum, whether one accepts the shroud or not, it highlights something essential about Christian claim. God is not distant, not abstract, not uninvolved. If Jesus is God, then the infinite entered the finite, and infinity accepted constraints. Eternity entered time. The Creator experienced hunger, fatigue, pain, death. The shroud doesn't depict a triumphant superhero. It shows a broken human body, and that matters, because it suggests that God does not solve suffering by avoiding it. He solves it by entering it. From an engineering perspective, Infinite God entering a finite system isn't just miraculous, it's a design decision. It implies that matter matters, that bodies matter, that suffering is not beneath the divine attention. Christianity does not treat the physical world as an illusion to escape. It treats it as something worth redeeming. The shroud, linen, blood, wounds fits that framework precisely. It doesn't say God erases the physical world. It says God transforms it. Notice something subtle. The body on the shroud appears real, physical, human, yet changed, not decomposing, not erased, transformed. That aligns with the Christian claim that resurrection is not a ghostly escape from matter, but a matter elevated, not abandonment of the human condition. It's fulfillment. If the shroud functions like a photograph, then what it captures isn't a man returning to life as before, but a human body crossing into something new, a bridge between morality and eternity. This suggests about the nature of God. At the very least, it suggests a God who enters history instead of standing above it, leaves evidence rather than demanding blind faith, values the physical world instead of discarding it, meets suffering from the inside. This is not a distant architect, not an indifferent force. This is a God who is present, a God willing to leave fingerprints. The shroud doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't force belief, it invites reflection, and maybe that's exactly what we should expect from a God who respects human freedom. If God really did enter the world as a man, then perhaps the evidence of that event would be quiet, physical, and waiting. For those willing to look, not just with faith, but with reason and wonder. Subscribe for more thoughtful conversations exploring God, doubt, and the questions I once asked as an atheist. And if you would like to get more information about the shroud, I left a couple of links in the details below. And may God bless.